Thank you all guys for coming. I would first like to thank the incredible team at Hyper Games Conference for making all of this possible, for bringing us all together here. I'm Sahand Malaei, co-founder and CEO at Dropout Games. We at Dropout Games have been making mobile games for the past 6 years or so. We entered the hyper-casual market about 3 years ago. We've made more than 50 games. We've had more than 50 million users worldwide. That was a big milestone for us. But recently, even though most of our success came through making hyper-casual games, we recently decided to actually make a move away from hyper-casual, completely away from hyper-casual, and into hybrid casual. And so in this talk, I am both going to go over the thought process behind our decision to abandon hyper-casual, and also I'm going to go over what our experience has been so far making hybrid casual games. Now, you see, if I came out here, let's say a year ago, and said that we're going to abandon hyper-casual completely and go all in for hybrid casual, maybe back then it would have seemed like a radical idea. But nowadays, a lot more teams have entered the space. They're doing hybrid casual. They're experimenting. Some have even put out hit games. And it's not such a radical idea anymore, and I'm not going to act like it is. But at the same time, I believe that hybrid casual is a space and is a segment of the market that deserves a lot more attention than it is getting right now. And so my talk today is going to be split into 3 parts. First, I will give you a little bit of history about how hyper-casual came to be, how it achieved tremendous growth, and how maybe its growth has started to decline a little bit. Then I will give you a bit of give you some definitions about what hybrid actually is and what hybrid can do to address a lot of the issues with hyper-casual. And in the third part, I'm going to give you what our experience has been. I'm going to talk about some key points from our experience making hybrid casual games for the past year. But before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit about my team's history, Dropout Games. You see, as I told you, we've had a lot of users. We've had 50 million users all over the world. But chances are you haven't heard of us before, you know. And that kind of makes sense because our team hasn't had a hit game in the classical sense of the word yet. So what we did was that, like, we spent 90% of our time doing what every other hyper-casual studio does. We made prototype after prototype in the hopes that one of them becomes a hit. What we did differently was that we spent 10%, no more, 10% of our time building projects with lower risks so that we could actually sustain ourselves. Because our team is 100% self-funded. We didn't get outside investment. And so we had to, our business had to survive. And so that 10% surprisingly accounts for most of our success. And to give you some examples of the stuff we did that got us the success, for example, we had some sort of a partnership with the Google Play Instant platform through our publisher, Fontory Studios. I think their CEO is in the audience right now. We had a partnership with Google through Fontory Studios on their Play Instant platform. It's a platform for small games. They featured us on their Google Play Games page. We had a lot of users there. Another thing we did was that we took popular game concepts and we sort of localized them and published them got them published in developing markets. And we had some success there, markets like India, like Brazil, China even. And so that's how we were able to survive in this market, even though we didn't have a hit game. And this is a photo of our team. We're a small team, only 6 people. I didn't know it was going to look this big when I was making the slides. And so yeah, we're sitting around a very delicious bowl of Caesar salad. It's kind of a tradition in our team. And so our team, we have been making lots of hyper-casual games, just trying our luck, one prototype after another. But the thing is, like after the 50th, 60th prototype that didn't work, and the results weren't getting better, they were getting worse, we frankly began to doubt if hyper-casual was still the right market for us to be in. If it's, we began to doubt if it still had the potential that we were looking for. And so that doubt, that doubt and fear caused us to go out and do some research. And we gathered some really amazing data that I'm excited to share with you today. And that brings us to the first part of my speech, which I call the problem with hyper-casual. I have gathered all the reasons why we decided to move away from hyper-casual in the first section of my talk. And so the first thing that I want you to know about hyper-casual is that hyper-casual has been growing tremendously over the past 5 years or so. There's no questioning that. And last year alone, over the course of the year 2022, hyper-casual, total downloads of the hyper-casual genre grew by, I believe it was 10 to 12%. And that is a very healthy number for the growth of any genre by any standard. However, what people don't often talk about is that during the same period of time, over the course of the year 2022, the number of games, number of hyper-casual games released on the App Store increased by a factor of 5. And so on the one hand, you have a 10% increase in market size, and on the other hand, you have a whopping 400% increase in competition. So that was a pretty big red flag for us. Like, the market was getting super competitive, and there were a lot of other players in the game, and so it kind of makes sense to us. Because, you know, back when we started to get into the hyper-casual market, we thought to ourselves, well, we were a much smaller team back then. We were only 2 people. So we thought to ourselves, there are these games out there, very simple games, very easy to make, and they're making lots of money. And so we thought to ourselves, well, those games are the perfect fit for our small team. And they were. Like, they were perfect for our small team. We spent a lot of time making hyper-casual games. But what we didn't think about, what we didn't consider at the time, was that a million other people were thinking the same thing. And so it was predictable that the market was going to get super competitive, super crowded, really fast. And it affected the CPI numbers. It was very hard to stand out in the market. Like for every good idea, there were like 10 copycats. There were like slight variations in the idea. The market got super competitive. And it got to the point that according to various estimates, there are different estimates, but to give you a range, the market is so competitive right now that around 1 in every 100 to 200 hyper-casual prototypes actually becomes a hit. And so that is a very low success rate. And when you're looking at that kind of a risk factor, well, you think to yourself that there has to be a big enough reward to compensate for that risk, you know? And so we thought to ourselves, well, maybe the risk is high, but the reward is can justify the risk. So we went around and asked some publishers, and they were kind enough to provide us with the revenue data. And we were shocked to learn that some of the hit games, like in the top charts, hyper-casual games, were only making maybe $10,000 to $30,000 a month for the developer. And so that threw the risk-reward equation out the window for us. It didn't make any sense anymore. You know, if only 1 in every 200 of your games is going to make it, and it's not going to make that much money, so what's the point anymore? And so low revenues, that was another red flag for us. And something I should say is that there is a problem with hyper-casual, and I believe it's got to do with the nature of this genre. And so when you're a developer, your chances of success are 1 in every 100, 200 prototypes. If you are a publisher, especially if you're a big name publisher, you're testing maybe like hundreds, even thousands of prototypes per month. So if you're a publisher, your hit game will come sooner or later. But as a developer, you might not live long enough to see one of your games become a hit. And I don't blame publishers for that, not at all. It's just how hyper-casual is structured. But as a game developer, as a hyper-casual game developer, you gotta consider all the factors and see what's right for you. And so we saw that the hyper-casual market was, favors the publisher more than the developer. And what's funny is that I was recently scrolling through the website of and on one part of their website they said that they have so far been able to publish, I think, more than 90 games. And what's funny is that on another part of their website they say that their tools and their platform and their data suite has been able to help 1,000 studios. And so it didn't make sense to me. Like, if you've only been able to publish 90 games, how on earth have you helped 1,000 studios? Because let's be honest, a lot of those 1,000 studios are not alive right now. So what's the helping in that? But you know, it was funny because they helped us on figure out that we shouldn't be in this market anymore. So that's one of the problems with hyper-casual. The market, in this market, the odds are stacked against the developer and in favor of the publisher. And so when we put that all together, when we saw all these reasons that hyper-casual was losing its momentum, when you put all these reasons together, the promise of hyper-casual for us was gone. And so we started to look for alternative ways, alternative ways to take our, like, for the future of our studio. And one name started popping up over and over again, which was a hybrid casual. And we researched a bunch of options. Hybrid casual seemed like the next logical step for us. And so in the next part of my speech, I'm going to go over some definitions, so we're all on the same page, and I'm going to tell you what hybrid casual is and how it addresses a lot of problems with hyper casual. Now, what is hybrid? You see, hyper casual, there's a really nice analogy I read on Deconstructor of Fun. Hyper casual is like the bubble gum of the gaming industry. You see, a hyper casual game is like a bubble gum. You pop it in, you keep chewing it for a couple minutes, and you get tired of it, you throw it out, and you pop the next one in, which is the next hyper casual game. The problem with hyper casual games is that while they're accessible to a wide audience, they are not playable for long, and there's not enough opportunity to monetize users while they're in your game. And so, that's where hybrid casual comes into play. You can see some screenshots of some very popular hyper casual games. The problem with them is that while they're super fun, super easy to pick up, at the same time their user lifespan is pretty low. But that's where hybrid casual comes into play. And I'm going to refer to hybrid casual as hybrid from now on to reduce the confusion. That's where hybrid comes in. You see, if we write down the names of different mobile game genres by order of complexity, on one end you have the hyper-casual genre, super accessible, super simple, a lot of people can play them. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got casual games, maybe a little further ahead, we have mid-core games. And so casual and mid-core games, what they're good at is keeping users engaged for long and monetizing users. And at the same time, they lack the extreme marketability that hyper-casual has. So basically, the idea, the gist behind hybrid is that what would happen if we took the very simple, super accessible, super marketable core loop from a hyper-casual game, and we combined it with some of the elements from mid-core and casual games that have been proven to help keep the user engaged for longer. And so there are a lot of ways to go about doing that. There are light hybrid games, we have deeper hybrid games. On the left side, you can see an example of a hybrid game that hasn't gone really far from the hyper-casual genre. It's called Farmland. It's a hyper-casual core with very thin layers of progression and monetization on top of it, and you can take the other extreme approach, which is like the stuff the publisher Happy puts out, like Archero. Survivor.io was recently massively successful. So those are deeper hybrid games. And so you can, your game can be anywhere on this spectrum. It's up to you. But essentially, what hybrid is taking layers of meta monetization and progression systems and adding them to a very simple core loop. And so when you take a look closely at what hybrid is, I believe hybrid is not so much a revolution in hyper-casual as it is simply the next logical step in this market. And that's because, you know, as the competition grew stronger, it became more and more expensive to acquire new users, and at the same time, user engagement rates dropped and user LTVs dropped, and so a lot of times it didn't make sense. A lot of the games weren't profitable anymore, and so hybrid's answer to that problem is really simple. Use elements from more complicated games in your hyper-casual game to make them more engaging and to be able to monetize your game better. And so, after we did our research, hybrid seemed like the next logical step for our group too. And so we started making hybrid casual games around a year ago, and we have some experience that I'm really excited to share with you today. If you choose to go down the path of making hybrid casual games. So I'm going to give you a few key points of the most important things that we learned making hybrid games. The first thing that really surprised us while making these hybrid casual games was that we grossly underestimated the time it would take to make hybrid games. And we wanted to make deep hybrid games, and we had no idea how long it would take to make one of those games. So what happened was that it took us like 2 weeks to make hyper-casual prototypes. But for one of the hybrid games we made, the core loop alone took us 4 months to implement. And that's the difference in scale I'm talking about. And so something interesting comes to mind. You know, our team, we used to work remotely. Like we were in different cities, 6 people, and this project was so demanding that we actually had to all move into one city and rent an office and work in person together. And the results have been incredible. It's been an incredible experience moving from remote work to in-person work. And so, yeah, that was the first problem we faced. Scale. We had no idea of the scale hybrid casual games required. The second thing that we learned while developing hybrid games is sort of a flip side to the point that I mentioned previously. You see, while it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort for you to make a hybrid game, especially if it's your first hybrid game, if you look closely at a lot of the hybrid games on the market today, you can see that a lot of the systems, a lot of the infrastructure of these games is shared. And so that investment that you need to make your first hybrid game is probably going to pay off in your next projects, because you can use a lot of the assets you've created, the infrastructure you've created for your first hybrid game in your future games. So it's not that big of a waste. And another flip side to hybrid games being so hard to make is that, well, like I said, hyper-casual as opposed to hybrid has a very low barrier of entry. So everybody can go out and start making hyper-casual games. Well, extremely small teams are doing it. As long as you have you have a great idea it doesn't matter if you executed on it well. In hyper-casual, the idea says. Meanwhile, in hybrid casual, because these games are so hard to make, you have a chance to actually differentiate what your team does, you know, because these games are so hard to execute on. If you know what you're doing, you might have a competitive advantage. It's no longer just putting out as many games as you can, as fast as you can. In the hybrid market, it actually pays off to work more on your game. Quality matters. And so you can stand out from the crowd, unlike hyper-casual. And like I said, what hybrid tries to do to address some of the problems of hyper-casual is that hyper-casual has a very low engagement rates, user engagement rates. Users play the game and they throw it away after a short while. And so we moved to hybrid for that exact same reason. And like many other studios, the metrics that we've been able to achieve with our recent hybrid games has actually proven to us that hybrid can work. And it's not just us. A lot of other studios have been trying things out with hybrid, and they have achieved the same results. And so there is actually a lot of potential in this market. And so yeah, that's what we learned so far, making hybrid games. And to sort of recap what I just told you. First, I told you a little bit about where hyper-casual is headed and how hybrid might be able to address some of its issues. Then I told you a little bit about what hybrid is and what its core strengths are compared to hyper-casual. And in the final part of my speech, I told you a little bit about what our experience has been developing hybrid games. Now, like I said, I believe hybrid deserves a lot more attention than it is getting today, and it would be great if more studios joined in and we could together maybe discover all the potential that it has. It's still a relatively new market. It's really exciting to be in this market. And so no matter what path you choose to take in your game development journey in the game industry, I wish you all the best of luck in the world, and thank you for listening. Okay, any questions? Sure. Go ahead. Right. Sure. Yeah. So right now, our games are in the soft launch phase. Like we haven't published them globally, but the numbers, especially regarding the engagement numbers I told you about, like while in hyper-casual we would rarely see engagement times upwards of, I think, 800 seconds. But in our latest hybrid games, we're seeing engagement times of more than 20, 30 minutes per day. So yeah, that was a big thing. Yeah. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you so much.